So starting off, my project was located in Newcastle and Gateshead. So you have two sides of Newcastle. On the north side of the River Tyne, you've got Newcastle, and on the south side of the river, you've got the river. On the south side of the River Tyne, you've got Gateshead, which is where my site was located. But the whole design studio, had the same site, which was the Gateshead Riverside Park. And to kind of begin, I was doing a study with Kevin Lynch's kind of image of the city and how it can be read, basically. So where you've got districts with higher, denser areas and lower density areas, basically with nodes, edges, main pathways, routes throughout the city, basically, and the various landmarks. And so this is a map just showing basically where my site was located. The actual site that we all had, the Riverside Park, was this area here, which was this really long, thin, narrow site. But basically, in semester 2, we were all told to pick a kind of refined site for our projects, and mine was the kind of yellow highlighted area there. And this is just a map just showing the vast topography of Newcastle. As you can see, they have like 5, 6, 7 bridges there. And in my master plan, I did propose another bridge. I don't know why, because there are so many bridges already there. And so in our groups, we had to do various site analysis and site research. And we all had kind of subgroups that we were allocated to for the site research. I was in the group of non-physical context, which is quite a hard thing to measure on a site, non-physical context. So my area that I looked into was kind of feelings when walking on the site and how you feel within the space. As you can see, it is a very overgrown, not kind of looked after park. I wouldn't recommend going there after 7 PM. Yeah. But yeah, basically very overgrown, not well looked after, but some very nice kind of architectural details, especially with the King Edward VII Bridge. There's this little kind of hidden alcove with the arches, which it's a really nice architectural detail. And to think that it's in the back of this park where no one can really see it, there's overgrown trees everywhere. It's, it's just very interesting. And so that's kind of where one of my sites is located. And the kind of, you can see it there, that's where the arches are there. And this is where my project kind of led to, which was this old council estate, which was built in the 1960s. And basically it was heavily inspired by Corbusier, very European, but as you can tell, it's very, very kind of cramped and very densely put together, basically. And then throughout my research looking at it, I basically looked at over time, because it was fully demolished in 1999, but as you can see, you kind of got the 1960s, where it was, fully developed. Then in the 1970s, when they added the community centre and the local pub, which all the residents really loved. And then in the 80s, they started demolishing some of the blocks. As you can see, the kind of density is very much reduced, which is kind of where my research led me to, was looking at how, basically, with the name Ghost of the Past, essentially, because the estate has been fully demolished, my project was looking at how could we have improved this council estate rather than demolishing it. So it's about looking at projects where, instead of demolishing buildings, how can we reuse them or make them better or improve them, basically. And then here are 2 images, one from the 1970s and then one of the year that I was basically in Newcastle, just showing the same sites that it's been completely demolished now, apart from one of the tower blocks. And then kind of looking into it and the kind of impact that the estate had on people, I joined like a Facebook group of past residents of the council estate, for all of the bad press that it had in, the newspapers at the time, and how there was so much antisocial behaviour, and it was, filled with, vandals and stuff like that. A lot of people on there had really good kind of memories of the council estate. And basically there was this one story that I found really interesting, was this fish and chip shop, which was located on the site, which is a picture of it there. There is a child in there, right by the newsagent, and basically, if you went to the newsagent, got a newspaper, and brought it to the fish and chip shop, the person in the chippy would give you free chips. So the kids would go and bring, basically the newspapers into the chippy and get free chips. And I thought that was just a nice, really cool story. Because it was just like, the place had soul, basically, had soul and character that went beyond the architectural, basically, how people use the space. And then here are some more pictures of the estate. These ones are taken basically when it was completed, before it started to be demolished, essentially. And also, you can kind of tell from these images, one of the main reasons that it failed was when it was built in stages, and the amenities that were planned were not built for like 15 years. The amenity spaces, so most of it was just mud terrain around the estate, basically. So all these amenity spaces, these playgrounds for the children, none of that was implemented till like the late 1980s. So it kind of, that was one of the reasons why it was kind of in decline, is because these spaces were not really there from the get-go, essentially. And then here, just another kind of part of my research was just looking at how similar the estate was to Corbusier's. As you can see from this kind of collage, on the right side of the collage is the Unité d'Habitation corridor in Marseille, and then on the left, a bit of graffiti, is the corridor from the inside of the council estate block, one of the blocks in St Cuthbert's, basically. But you can see, why not, you know, you can just tell the difference between how things are kept, and upkeep is quite important, whereas the upkeep, you know, in obviously the Corbusier's blocks, because obviously it has that kind of high standing with his architectural influence, basically they're well looked after, but these estates in Gateshead, as you can tell, you know, were pretty run down and they weren't really maintained. But again, you know, people's opinions do matter, and the residents loved their time there, so for the odd few, you know, antisocial behaviour bits that were there, you know, on the most part, the residents did love living there. And then, so this is kind of my end of semester one master plan, because we were all given the kind of task of making an urban scale intervention on what we do on a larger scale. And mine was basically looking at how we could improve the estate. Well, mine was looking at how I could improve the estate, basically. And then also bringing to the wider area a greater impact. And so my kind of proposal was to say fewer blocks, but having the amenity spaces around those blocks for people to basically use and bring, you know, more footfall to the space within the King Edward VII Bridge kind of area, which my plan was to put kind of a community centre within there. And these were some initial sketches that I was doing for that first semester with the ideas that I had. So on the left you see kind of the renovation of those council blocks and the kind of starting idea that I had to change the facades and what was going on with those. And then initially the idea was to have on the ground floor kind of those be public areas, so coffee shops, you know, shops, that kind of stuff, just to kind of bring an increased footfall to the area, and then a bit of footfall to the park itself, because again, not many people are using it, even though it's a lovely park, it's overgrown. And my idea was to bring some kind of architectural intervention to that area to bring more footfall in, which I then decided to go for the community centre. And here again, with another sketch showing that idea. And then on the right, showing basically one of my initial sketches of one of the blocks, and the idea that I had to basically remove the front facades and create holes in to create these kind of winter garden spaces like the Lacton and Versailles project, basically, where you then open up the entire facade to bring more natural light in, but then also bring a whole new space that can be used in different ways, essentially. And this was just one of the final kind of axos of that first semester, just showing kind of the vast topography and kind of initial site massing on the site, and then the new proposed bridge as well, just to kind of show kind of the topography on the site. And then this was kind of my final site plan, just showing my intervention. So with fewer site blocks, the new additions, but then also inside the King Edward VII Bridge, the new proposed community centre. And as we go through, you can see an axo of that community centre there, which was basically, the material I chose to go with was like a recycled stone brick to kind of match the aesthetic of the bridge itself. And then with the proposed housing, which I'll get onto in a little bit, the idea was to have these kind of timber additions to those, because our project was really focused, our studio, not my project specifically, but our entire studio, the main focus was on using timber construction. We did many site visits to Kill the Forest to kind of do some research on timber construction, basically, which was really interesting. And then this is just showing up close one of my plans of one of the blocks, what the typical block could look like, and the various interventions. So the idea was essentially to have these modular systems which could be adaptable based on the user's requirements and the residents' requirements. So, you know, if they were to have a child, they could add an extra bedroom at the rear. If they wanted a larger living space, they could have a smaller increase at the front. If they needed a bigger dining kitchen area, that could be extended. If they simply wanted a winter garden kind of semi-outdoor space, the whole front could kind of be that. And then you'd also have outdoor kind of roof terraces if there were no requirements. If the requirements were fine for the residents and they didn't need any extra kind of square meterage, you could have roof gardens or terraces basically. And then this is just a section cutting through the community centre that I proposed. Basically, as I mentioned before, kind of the main linking area between the new kind of proposed additions for the housing. I was proposing this community centre to basically act as the heart of the community where people from Gateshead could come to, but also people from Newcastle, and bringing those communities together essentially and creating that extra footfall, which would then also bring more vibrancy back to the park itself and actually bring it back into use. And this is just a section cutting through one of the housing blocks showing the modular kind of system with the CLT construction and glue lamp kind of beams and columns, showing basically the different types of rooms that you could have. So you could have new office spaces on the left, dining, bedroom spaces in the middle, or larger living spaces, open plan spaces on the right. And then also with the void spaces in between, so the units behind with their fully kind of glazed ceiling to floor height kind of glazing could get basically more natural lighting. And then here, just an elevation and section. The elevation showing one of my ideas, which we all had kind of a technical symposium where the whole studio had to come up with a kind of exhibition. My area, I focused on essentially this timber construction facade where the users and residents, because from my research I did, one of the things that kind of led to antisocial behaviour was residents not feeling this kind of sense of ownership, that their home wasn't truly theirs. It was just kind of they were occupying this space, but it wasn't really theirs. So one of the kind of small interventions that I decided to make was, say, having these kind of facade panels, cladding panels that could be chosen by the residents, and they could choose what they wanted their home to basically look like from the exterior with various different patterns and cladding essentially. And then on the right, just this section showing the existing and how my modular system attaches to that, and the spaces, what they look like in between with the kind of void spaces, and getting that natural light still into the existing block, but also having those new spaces come off that. And then all the ones that did have the kind of extensions right the way to the back, they have these kind of balcony areas. And then finally, just a visual just showing basically in the community centre, bringing back that story from the old fish and chip shop that the children kind of really liked, bringing the newspaper into the fish and chip shop. I had proposed on the ground floor of the community centre like a fish and chip shop, essentially, where bringing back the old stories, and yeah, just basically showing that.
Very cool.
Thank you very much.